Let's rewind time, not just a few hundred years or even a few million, but around 60 million years ago to the Paleocene epoch. Dinosaurs are gone. The meteor impact that ended the Cretaceous wiped them out. The Earth is healing, the skies are still thick with carbon, and rainforests are just beginning to spread across the planet again. The world is hot. And we're not talking about your average summer afternoon in Florida. Back then, global temperatures were 5 to 10 degrees Celsius hotter than today. There were no ice caps at the poles. Carbon dioxide levels were through the roof, nearly 4 times what we see now. Tropical rainforests stretched across what is now Colombia, Brazil, and the northern parts of South America. And it's in these lush, steaming, swampy jungles where something truly terrifying begins to emerge. Meet Titanoboa keraginensis, the undisputed largest snake ever discovered in the fossil record. Discovered in 2009 in the Cerrejón coal mines of Colombia, Titanoboa wasn't just big, it redefined what we thought was even possible in reptilian biology. Based on fossilized vertebrae and ribs, paleontologists estimate Titanoboa could grow up to 42 to 50 feet long. That's longer than a school bus, and weighed around 2,500 pounds. Its body was so thick you couldn't wrap your arms around it. Its head was the size of a carry-on suitcase, and its jaws could easily have swallowed crocodiles whole. But the strangest part, Titanoboa didn't just survive the dinosaur apocalypse. It thrived in the vacuum they left behind. The Cerrejón Formation is one of the most valuable fossil sites ever discovered in South America. Before 2004, scientists had little idea of what tropical ecosystems looked like after the extinction of the dinosaurs. That all changed when an international team of paleontologists, led by Dr. Jonathan Block from the University of Florida, and Dr. Carlos Jaramillo from the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, started digging through the thick black coal beds of Cerrejón. What they found shocked them. An entire lost world, complete with fossilized palm trees, ancient turtles the size of kiddie pools, and Titanoboa, a predator so big it reshaped our understanding of snake evolution, climate science, and the food chain of ancient ecosystems. As Dr. Block famously said in a press release, this animal was basically the apex predator of its time. There's nothing around today even close to its size. But here's the burning question. What if Titanoboa never went extinct? What if it slithered through the shadows of the modern world, hidden in the untouched corners of the Amazon or lurking deep beneath murky rivers? What if human civilization rose not as the dominant life form, but as prey? To answer that, we must understand not just how Titanoboa lived, but what made it possible in the first place. Here's something wild. Titanoboa couldn't exist in today's world, at least not easily. Why? It all comes down to ectothermic biology, that is how cold-blooded animals regulate their body temperature. Snakes, like all reptiles, rely on their environment to warm up. The hotter the world, the larger reptiles can grow, because heat speeds up their metabolism. So, for Titanoboa to exist, it needed extreme tropical heat. The Paleocene epoch was perfect. It was hot, stable, and lush. Carbon dioxide blanketed the planet, the oceans were warm, and rainforests covered vast continents. Food was plentiful, and with no large land predators to compete with, Titanoboa became the ruler of its realm. But here's the catch. Those same environmental factors that allowed it to grow also limited where it could live. Fossil evidence suggests Titanoboa thrived in equatorial regions, where the average annual temperature was around 32 degrees Celsius, or 90 degrees Fahrenheit, or more. So how did it hunt? That's the terrifying part. Titanoboa wasn't venomous, it didn't need to be. Its preferred style of killing? Constriction, just like its modern cousin, the boa constrictor. But at its size, constriction meant something very different. According to biomechanical models from the University of Toronto, Titanoboa's muscles could generate up to 400 pounds of pressure per square inch. That's like placing a grand piano on your chest and then doubling it. One squeeze could collapse lungs, snap spines, and cut off blood flow in seconds. It didn't bite and wait for its prey to die. It squeezed the life out of it while silently dragging it into the muddy jungle waters. Its primary prey? Likely giant prehistoric crocodiles known as Dirosaurids, ancient relatives of today's crocs. Fossils from Sarajevo show bite marks and compression fractures on their remains, consistent with constrictor attacks. Just imagine that. A creature longer than a subway car, hiding beneath brown, algae-covered riverbanks, waiting for something to drink, then exploding out of the water like a coiled spring. And that brings us back to our what if. If Titanoboa had survived climate fluctuations, mass extinctions, and the rise of mammalian predators, and had somehow evolved alongside humans, how different would the world be? Would we treat rivers the way we treat shark-infested oceans, full of hidden threats, slithering in the dark? Would we have dared settle in South America at all? Could our ancestors have learned to live with such a beast, or against it? Would Titanoboa have evolved even larger with no predators to limit its size, or would it have shrunk to survive in shrinking tropical zones? These aren't just speculative questions. They speak to something deeper, about the fragility of ecosystems, about how climate makes or breaks monsters, and how close our world came to being ruled not by mammals, but by reptiles. Because here's the thing. Titanoboa may be extinct, but its cousins are not. Anacondas, pythons, and boas still roam the earth, and some are growing larger than ever, aided by modern urban sprawl and climate warming. So, could Titanoboa return, not through time travel but through evolutionary rebirth? Could modern snakes, under the right conditions, grow to rival their ancient ancestor? That's the question we explore next. If Titanoboa needed extreme heat to survive, what happens when Earth starts heating up again? Could climate change accidentally recreate the conditions needed for giant reptiles to return? In the next chapter, we dive deep into how today's warming climate might unlock evolutionary forces we thought were buried with the fossils. Are we heading into a future where monsters of the past become monsters of the present? Let's find out. Resurrecting a legend, the real Titanoboa. Sometimes the most extraordinary creatures aren't imagined, they're uncovered. In 2009, deep within the Sarajevo coal mines of northern Colombia, a group of paleontologists stumbled upon a fossil that changed our understanding of prehistoric life forever. The Sarajevo Formation was already a goldmine for ancient plant fossils and reptiles. But what Dr. Jonathan Block, of the University of Florida, and Dr. Carlos Jaramillo, of the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, found there was nothing short of astonishing, massive vertebrae, unlike anything seen before. At first, scientists thought they had stumbled upon a large crocodile, but as they pieced the fossils together, it became clear they were looking at a giant snake. A snake so massive it dwarfed everything alive today. A new species was named Titanoboa carajonensis. Block once said, "You're looking at the largest predator on the planet for at least 10 million years after the dinosaurs went extinct." The Karajan site was crucial not just for this discovery but because it preserved an entire ancient rainforest ecosystem, offering a rare window into the Paleocene, an era often overlooked yet pivotal in the story of life on Earth. It's easy to throw out big numbers, but let's pause and imagine what this actually means. Titanoboa stretched up to 50 feet in length. That's about the length of a city bus. Its girth, close to 3 feet thick. If you tried to wrap your arms around its body, they wouldn't even come close. Scientists estimate it weighed over 2,500 pounds, more than a fully grown polar bear. One vertebra alone, found nearly 10 feet underground, measured more than twice the size of any anaconda vertebra ever discovered. And there were dozens of these vertebrae. It wasn't just long, it was powerful. Studies in comparative biomechanics, such as those from the University of Toronto, suggest that Titanoboa could exert more than 400 psi of constriction pressure, enough to break the spine of its prey, crush bones, and stop the heart in seconds. This snake didn't just slither, it dominated. To understand Titanoboa, you have to understand the world it came from. This wasn't today's Earth. It was hotter, wilder, more primal. Roughly 60 million years ago, during the Paleocene epoch, the world was still recovering from the extinction of the dinosaurs. The asteroid that had wiped out 75% of life was now ancient history, and new life was beginning to emerge. But the environment was extreme by modern standards. The average global temperature was around 30 to 34 degrees Celsius, or 86 to 93 degrees Fahrenheit. There were no polar ice caps, sea levels were higher. Atmospheric CO2 concentrations were more than 1,000 parts per million, nearly 3 times what we experience today. In this super greenhouse world, tropical rainforests sprawled across northern South America. Towering prehistoric palms, massive ferns, and dense underbrush blanketed the land. Humidity levels were oppressive. Rivers were wide, slow-moving, and full of life. The Resurrecting rainforest in particular was one of the oldest and most diverse tropical ecosystems ever discovered, according to the Paleobiology database and research published in Nature in 2009. It was home to massive reptiles, crocodilian ancestors, enormous turtles, and primitive mammals. And sitting atop this lush, wet, sweltering empire was a single, unrivaled apex predator. What it ate. Titanoboa didn't nibble on mice. The fossil site at Resurrecting didn't just preserve the remains of the snake, it also preserved the remains of its prey. Among the most notable were massive dirosaurid crocodiliforms, ancient, crocodile-like reptiles that grew up to 20 feet long. Their fossils bore signs of constriction and breakage patterns consistent with a massive constrictor. These weren't sneak attacks on small lizards, these were full-blown ambushes on 500 to 1,000-pound armored predators. Titanoboa likely hunted by waiting motionless in the water, just like modern anacondas do. When an unsuspecting croc, or perhaps a gigantic side-necked turtle came close enough, it would strike with lightning speed, coil its massive body around its prey and squeeze until the animal couldn't breathe or move. Then, thanks to highly flexible jaw ligaments, it could unhinge its jaws and swallow the animal whole, head first, in one nightmarish gulp. In many ways, its hunting style was shockingly similar to today's anacondas, but amplified in size, strength, and lethality. Every ecosystem has a top of the food chain. In the modern Amazon, it might be the jaguar. In Africa, the lion or Nile crocodile. In the oceans, the great white shark. In Titanoboa's world, not only was Titanoboa the largest animal in its ecosystem, it was the deadliest. It was the apex predator of the Paleocene tropics. The mammals of the time were small, rat-like, and still recovering from the global extinction. Birds of prey were evolving, but none were a match. Even crocodile-like reptiles, which are fierce hunters today, were prey, not predators. Researchers at the Smithsonian Institution believe that Titanoboa helped regulate the populations of other large reptiles, keeping ecological balance in check. In this sense, it wasn't just a killer. it was a keystone species. Its dominance shaped the jungle. And with no natural predators, the only thing that could bring it down was climate change. The twist: Titanoboa was more than a snake. Here's where the twist hits hardest. When we say snake, you probably imagine something coiled on a forest floor, maybe dangerous, maybe fast. But still, just a snake. Titanoboa wasn't just a snake, it was a relic. A fossilized echo of a planet that nearly took a different evolutionary path. If conditions had remained hot, wet, and reptile-friendly, mammals might have never risen to the top. No humans, no civilizations, no cities. Instead, you'd have a planet ruled by cold-blooded giants. Rainforests where Titanoboa's descendants still ruled, riverbanks where no mammal dared to drink, forests where the top predators slithered, not stalked. Titanoboa is more than a prehistoric snake. It's a monument to a world we narrowly escaped, a version of Earth where reptiles never gave up the crown. But what if we didn't escape? What if we're heading right back into the kind of world Titanoboa loved, hot, humid, flooded with carbon dioxide? In our next chapter, we ask a chilling question. Could climate change bring something like Titanoboa back? If the planet heats up and tropical zones expand, could today's snakes begin to grow again? Could nature, through evolution, rewrite a forgotten script? And more terrifyingly, what if it's already started? Chapter 2. What if Titanoboa never went extinct? A new evolutionary tree. How evolution might have shaped it further. Let's imagine, just for a moment, that Titanoboa didn't vanish. That after dominating the Paleocene swamps, this snake survived the subtle cooling of the Eocene, outlasted the rise of the mammals, and quietly slithered its way through tens of millions of years, evolving, adapting, surviving. What would evolution have done to such a creature? According to evolutionary biologists at the University of Florida's Herpetology Department, reptilian lineages that persist over deep time usually diversify dramatically. Just as small mammals evolved into elephants, whales, and bats, Titanoboa's descendants could have diverged into entirely new forms. Some might have adapted to oceanic life, becoming serpentine marine predators akin to the extinct mosasaurs. Others could have evolved into arboreal giants, dominating the forest canopies like massive coiled shadows. Still others might have specialized. Shorter-bodied Titanoboas optimized for speed or stealth, their scales camouflaged in jungle underbrush. Natural selection would push the lineage in response to changing climate-shifting prey and rising mammalian competition. The Titanoboa of today might not just be a scaled-up version of its ancestor, it might be smarter, more social, even more strategically evolved. Imagine a cold-blooded super predator with not just power but tactical intelligence. Would it compete with pythons, anacondas, or replace them? If Titanoboa had survived and continued evolving, it would have faced the rising competition of modern snakes, reticulated pythons, green anacondas, king cobras. But here's the thing, none of those snakes were around when Titanoboa reigned. They all came millions of years later. So the question is, would Titanoboa coexist with them or outcompete and replace them? Ecological competition studies, such as those in the Journal of Evolutionary Biology, show that when two closely related species overlap in size, habitat, and diet, they either specialize to avoid conflict, or one eliminates the other. If Titanoboa remained as large and as dominant, it's unlikely the modern giants we know, pythons and anacondas, would have even evolved. Or, if they had, they would have evolved to avoid the swamps, relegated to forests or grasslands, surviving in the shadows of their giant cousin. In fact, today's largest snakes, like the green anaconda, might just be dwarfed offshoots of Titanoboa's genetic line. The giants we marvel at in documentaries might have been the runts in a world where 40-foot constrictors were the norm. And it begs another question. If Titanoboa had remained, would we even call it giant, or would our entire definition of size be different? Now here's where things get personal. In our real timeline, mammals rose to dominance partly because the top predators, the dinosaurs, were gone. With Titanoboa out of the way by the Eocene, mammals could safely grow larger, smarter, and more complex. But what if Titanoboa never left? In a world where apex predators slither silently through every major jungle and wetland, the evolution of mammals would have been radically different. First, large herbivores might never have flourished. Giant prey attracts giant predators, so deer, antelope, and even early elephant ancestors might have remained small, fast, and ultra-alert. Second, predatory mammals would have had a hard time reaching the top. Wolves might not have evolved in large packs. They would be picked off by coiling ambush predators in the dark. Cats might never have grown big enough to take on prey alone. And humans? Our story might never have started. According to a 2016 comparative analysis published in Evolutionary Ecology, the presence of large ambush predators in an environment significantly delays the development of tool use in primates. In short, when you're constantly hiding from a monster, you don't have time to invent. Our brains might have stayed small, our tribes always on the run, civilization, maybe a dream that never took root. Would it become smarter, faster, bigger, or smaller? One common misconception is that evolution always makes things bigger, faster, and stronger. But sometimes survival means shrinking. If Titanoboa faced major environmental pressures, cooling climates, limited prey, human encroachment, it might have evolved in a completely different direction. Smaller bodies are easier to heat in cooler environments, less food required, more maneuverability in dense forests. So instead of seeing 50-foot monsters slithering across continents, we might have seen a world filled with 30-foot mini Titanoboas, still large by today's standards, but better suited for survival in a changing world. On the flip side, in isolated, protected ecosystems like the Amazon basin or Indonesian archipelagos, some lineages might have grown even larger. Just as island gigantism gave us enormous monitor lizards like the Komodo dragon, isolated Titanoboas might have reached 60 or 70 feet, their metabolism finely tuned to modern conditions. And intelligence? Well, reptiles aren't known for brilliance, but that's changing. Recent studies in herpetology show that some snakes can problem solve, remember prey patterns, and even coordinate hunting in loose social groups. If that trend held true, Titanoboa could have evolved a new form of reptilian cognition, not mammalian, not emotional, but efficient, calculating, predatory. A 60-foot snake that knows how to learn, that's no longer just a predator, that's a nightmare. In an ecosystem, apex predators don't just react to their surroundings, they shape them. Today's lions influence the behavior of zebras. Wolves alter the flow of rivers by controlling deer populations. Even whales, by feeding at the bottom and defecating at the top, fertilize entire oceans. Titanoboa would have been no different. Forests would grow denser near water sources where Titanoboa avoided due to high human activity. Other species might evolve heightened night vision, since a massive predator that hunts by ambush forces prey to adapt quickly. Birds might evolve better aerial surveillance techniques, perhaps even cooperative flocks that warn mammals of incoming predators. Monkeys might build their nests higher, further out on thinner branches, where no 50-foot snake could reach. In essence, entire ecosystems would warp around Titanoboa's presence. The landscape of fear it would create could ripple out across species, shaping everything from plant growth patterns to migration routes. Even humans, if we existed at all, would have built our cities and myths in response to this serpent. It would have shaped our religions, our gods, our fears. Maybe we'd revere it, or maybe we'd wage war against it. Here's where it hits you. Titanoboa didn't just rule the jungle. It may have shaped the entire future of life on Earth. If it hadn't gone extinct, then the mammals that followed would have evolved in fear, not freedom. Maybe no saber-tooths, no horses, no dogs, maybe no humans at all. And even if we had evolved, would we still have claimed the top spot? Or would we now live in shadowed cities, peeking out only in daylight, hiding from something that still slithers through the jungle night? Would we even dare to build civilizations in the tropics, or would entire continents still be off limits, ruled by scales and silence? So now we ask something even more chilling. Could something like Titanoboa return, not from fossils but from inside the modern genome? Have we already seen hints in super pythons, invasive anacondas, or massive snakes that seem to defy modern limits? In the next chapter, we'll dive into the possibility of Titanoboa's revival, not through evolution, but through science. Because some scientists aren't waiting for nature to bring it back. Some are trying to resurrect it. Title Chapter 3, Titanoboa in the Modern World. Could we coexist? Let's get this straight first. The Earth Titanoboa knew was nothing like the one we live in now. 60 million years ago, during the Paleocene epoch, the Earth was hotter, a lot hotter. According to climate models from Nature Ecology, the average temperature in Titanoboa's time was about 88 to 92 degrees Fahrenheit near the equator, compared to today's 80 degrees Fahrenheit average. That kind of heat acted like a giant battery pack for cold-blooded creatures. It gave them the energy to grow big and move fast. So, could Titanoboa even survive in the modern world, where many rainforests are cooling due to deforestation and global climate changes? Surprisingly, yes, but only in very specific pockets of the planet. The Amazon basin, for example, still offers swampy, low-lying wetlands with high humidity and relatively stable warm temperatures. The Congo rainforest is another. And in Southeast Asia, places like Borneo and Sumatra still maintain that thick, ancient humidity. But here's the catch. Titanoboa would be living at the edge of its comfort zone. It wouldn't flourish like it once did. It would be surviving, not dominating, unless it adapted. And as we've seen with other reptiles like pythons in Florida, it doesn't take long for nature to find a way. Let's get specific. If Titanoboa returned today, it wouldn't take over the world. But it could carve out a terrifying niche in regions where humans and nature already battle for space. In South America, the flooded forests of the Amazon River would be ground zero. With 1 in every 10 species on Earth calling the Amazon home, there's food, cover, and room to hide. And unlike 60 million years ago, now there are villages, roads, boats, and humans. In Central Africa, the dense Congo basin is dark, wet, and largely unexplored. Perfect territory for an ambush predator. It would find crocodiles, primates, small elephants, and perhaps no one watching. In Southeast Asia, places like the Mekong Delta or Indonesian peat swamps would offer abundant prey and swampy camouflage. But the real concern? Titanoboa wouldn't have to stay there. Because the same global shipping networks that accidentally carried Burmese pythons to Florida, brown tree snakes to Guam, and rats across the globe, could just as easily carry Titanoboa to your doorstep. Think about it. One 50-foot-long, 2,500-pound snake with enough muscle to crush a cow in minutes. Now imagine that near farms, villages, or urban outskirts. Titanoboa doesn't hunt loudly. It doesn't leave a trail like a tiger or make warning calls like a wolf. It ambushes silently, patiently, which means you don't know it's there until it's already too late. In high-risk zones, like Amazonian riverbanks or Southeast Asian wetlands, humans might be forced to make radical changes to infrastructure. Imagine elevated homes on stilts, nighttime curfews during mating season, barriers and fences around urban swamps, just like crocodile zones in northern Australia. Emergency teams trained not for fires or floods, but for snake breaches. Tourism would collapse in affected zones, agriculture would be under threat, livestock would vanish overnight. In some areas, entire communities might abandon fertile land simply because the jungle fights back. And remember, Titanoboa doesn't roar, it doesn't stalk, it waits underground in water beneath your feet. Let's talk about cities. Cities like Manaus in Brazil, Kinshasa in Congo, or Bangkok in Thailand are all built near rivers or wetland areas. These regions already battle wildlife conflict, crocodiles, invasive snakes, rabid monkeys. But Titanoboa? That's a different story. Imagine a predator that doesn't just bite, it crushes, coils, and swallows whole. Now imagine that predator navigating storm drains, canals, and underground subway tunnels, especially during monsoon seasons when urban water systems overflow. Cities might have to install massive reinforced barriers like steel grates across sewer inlets or mesh-reinforced waterways to block off jungle to urban access points. You'd see warning signs posted along waterfronts. You'd hear government-issued advisories not to walk dogs near canals. You'd see parks closed for monitoring. You'd watch drone footage of a 40-foot serpent basking near a power plant. And no matter what precautions we'd take, one terrifying truth would remain: nature always finds a crack. We've already seen how devastating invasive reptiles can be. The Burmese python in the Florida Everglades, introduced accidentally, has eaten everything from raccoons to alligators, and now numbers in the tens of thousands. Some grow to 18 feet and they're multiplying. Now scale that up. Titanoboa, introduced into a fragile ecosystem like southern Florida or Southeast Asia, could destroy native species before we even realize it's there. According to global invasive species databases, the biggest threats come not just from the creature itself, but from our inability to act quickly enough. Species like the Nile monitor lizard, African clawed frog, and cane toad became permanent invaders because governments responded too late. And Titanoboa wouldn't need many individuals to take hold. A single gravid female hiding in a remote, wet region could trigger a biological crisis. No native species could challenge it. No large carnivore would be safe. And in regions without natural predators or competition, Titanoboa wouldn't just survive, it would take over, the subterranean nightmare. We often imagine monsters in the forests, in rivers, in caves. But what if Titanoboa didn't stop at the wild? What if it slipped into our world? Not just the forests of the Amazon, but the subways of New York, the drainage canals of Bangkok, the abandoned subway tunnels of Sao Paulo. Storm drains become highways. Underground construction sites become hunting grounds. Flooded subways after hurricanes turn into perfect breeding pools. Imagine Titanoboa in the belly of the city, not just lurking, but living, nesting, reproducing. By the time we'd notice, it wouldn't be one snake. It would be a population. And now the real question: would we even be able to stop it? So far we've asked what if Titanoboa never went extinct, but what if we're the ones bringing it back? In the next chapter we go even deeper into laboratories, genetics labs, and controversial experiments where scientists are trying to bring prehistoric creatures back to life. Could Titanoboa be resurrected by science? What if it isn't nature we should fear, but ourselves? Let's assume the impossible just happened. Somewhere in the Amazon a camera trap catches it. A ripple in the river. A tail the size of a tree trunk sliding silently through the shallows. Titanoboa. Alive. The question isn't just how to find it, but how to study it. You can't throw a net over something that weighs over 2,500 pounds. You can't tranquilize it with darts made for elephants. Its body is so massive, muscles so dense, it might need custom pharmaceuticals just to keep it sedated for transport. And then there's the problem of moving it. Would we use cranes, build steel frame transport cages, haul it with helicopters from the depths of the jungle? Even if we could capture one, there's no precedent for containing something this size, not just physically but biologically. It would need a watertight habitat the size of a football field, water temperature kept at a constant 90 degrees Fahrenheit, a steady diet of large prey, possibly pigs, deer, or crocodiles, constant sedation protocols if it becomes aggressive or stressed. Scientists from Harvard's Evolutionary Biology department estimate it would take millions of dollars per year to keep even one Titanoboa alive in captivity. But here's the big question. Even if we could capture it, should we? Could zoos contain it? Let's fast forward. Somehow, Titanoboa is captured alive and brought to a major zoo, say the Smithsonian National Zoo, or the San Diego Zoo. Could it be kept in a secure exhibit? Short answer, no existing zoo on Earth is ready for Titanoboa. The largest snake enclosures today are built for anacondas and reticulated pythons, topping out at around 20 feet. Titanoboa is over double that, and its sheer bulk and aquatic lifestyle make containment a nightmare. To properly house it, a zoo would need an Olympic-sized indoor swamp, heated and humidified year-round, industrial-grade steel-reinforced glass, emergency protocols in case of flooding, escape, or aggression, a 24/7 surveillance system with multiple emergency lockdown triggers. And what happens during feeding time? Feeding a Titanoboa isn't as simple as dropping a rat into a cage. It could require live prey, raising serious ethical concerns. Even artificial feeding would be risky. The snake could misfire, striking through glass or attacking handlers. Would zoos take the risk? Some might, but many would refuse, not out of fear but because they'd understand a basic truth. Titanoboa wasn't meant for a cage. Would we try to weaponize it? It sounds like a sci-fi movie plot. The military discovers a living Titanoboa, and instead of preserving it they ask, can we use it? It's not as far-fetched as it seems. Declassified U.S. military documents from the Cold War show that exotic animals were once trained for espionage and warfare. According to the U.S. Naval Institute, projects like Acoustic Kitty and Project X-Ray were more than urban legends. They were funded, tested, and operational. So why wouldn't a prehistoric apex predator pique their interest? Think about it. Stealth movement in swamps and jungles, near-silent hunting, ambush tactics, armor-piercing muscle. While you can't put a laser on its head or drop it from a plane, imagine a Titanoboa released in enemy territory. Untraceable, unprogrammable, and uncontrollable. Of course, the problem is in that last word, uncontrollable. And that's why no military could ever truly weaponize a Titanoboa. It doesn't follow orders, it doesn't distinguish friend from foe, and once it's out, it stays out. Could we clone it using fossil DNA? Now let's dive deeper into the science of resurrection. Could we bring Titanoboa back with fossil DNA like Jurassic Park? In theory, yes. In practice, not yet, but we're closer than you think. According to research archived at the Smithsonian Fossil DNA Archives, Titanoboa fossils have been remarkably well preserved in the Cerrejón coal mines of Colombia. But no intact DNA has ever been extracted from them. Why? Because DNA degrades over time. After 60 million years, even in ideal conditions, the strands have likely broken into millions of unreadable fragments. Still, hope isn't dead. Using fragment reconstruction, gene synthesis, and cross-species hybridization, scientists are already working on de-extincting species like the woolly mammoth. The idea? Plug broken DNA into the genome of a close living relative. For Titanoboa, the closest relatives today are boa constrictors and anacondas. Scientists at Harvard's Weiss Institute suggest it might be possible to reconstruct key traits into a genetically engineered neo-snake. Would it be a true Titanoboa? No, but it would be Titanoboa enough to change everything. Here's where things get wild. Enter CRISPR, a revolutionary gene editing tool that's been called the scalpel of biology. CRISPR allows scientists to cut and paste genetic code with astonishing precision. It's already been used to edit human embryos, create disease-resistant crops, modify animals to glow in the dark, resurrect proteins from extinct species. So could CRISPR help us bring back Titanoboa? According to Scientific American, CRISPR could theoretically stitch together surviving fragments of Titanoboa's genome, integrating them into a living snake embryo. Over time, through selective breeding and gene refinement, scientists could replicate the size, power, and appearance of the prehistoric predator. But here's the moral minefield. What happens if we succeed? Where would it live? Who controls it? And what if it escapes? CRISPR is like a loaded gun in the hands of a child. It's powerful, it's precise, and it's easy to misuse. If a rogue lab or a wealthy collector wanted to create their own monster, no one could stop them. Here's the part that makes your stomach twist. We already have most of the technology required to bring Titanoboa back. We have fossil samples, we have advanced gene editing tools, we have cloning techniques perfected on mammals, and we have a growing movement in the scientific world pushing for de-extinction. But the real question isn't can we, it's should we. Titanoboa went extinct for a reason. It belonged to an Earth with different rules, different temperatures, and no humans to challenge it. Bringing it back wouldn't be about science, it wouldn't be about curiosity, it would be about power. And once that door is opened, once we play God with something this dangerous, what stops us from doing it again? If science succeeds in bringing back Titanoboa, what happens next? What if it escapes? What if it spreads? In the next chapter we follow the unthinkable, Titanoboa Unleashed, a modern-day invasion scenario. A single creature, a global impact. Can we survive a predator from the past, in the world we built today? Chapter 5. Ecological chaos, what Titanoboa would do to Earth's balance. Predator-prey collapse, local species extinctions. Let's say Titanoboa is back, and not in a zoo but in the wild. Maybe it escaped, maybe it was released, or maybe, just maybe, it evolved in hiding. No matter how it reappears, the moment Titanoboa enters a modern ecosystem, everything changes. Because it's not just a snake, it's a biological wrecking ball. Picture this. In a place like the Amazon, one adult Titanoboa would eat massive prey, like caimans, capybaras, wild pigs, or even small deer, and it wouldn't stop with one. At its peak size, over 2,500 pounds, a Titanoboa could eat hundreds of pounds of meat per month. Within weeks, prey species would start vanishing, not just one kind, whole clusters of animals. From there, the effects ripple outward. Animals that rely on those prey species, for example jaguars and ocelots, would face starvation. Scavengers like vultures and opossums would find less food. And plant life would suffer too, since some animals that help disperse seeds or control pests would now be gone. The balance that took millions of years to evolve could be wrecked in a matter of months. Impact on the food chain. In ecology there's a term, trophic cascade. It describes what happens when a major predator is added or removed from an ecosystem. Titanoboa wouldn't just cause a cascade, it would trigger an ecological collapse, because today's food chains aren't built to handle a predator that never should have existed in this era. It doesn't have any natural enemies. Its size protects it from attack, and it can outcompete everything from crocodiles to cats. Even top predators like anacondas or big cats don't stand a chance. Titanoboa is simply too large, too stealthy, and too unstoppable. And if multiple Titanoboas reproduced, the system would collapse even faster. In just a few years, entire species could go regionally extinct. According to the IUCN Red List, many tropical mammals and reptiles already live on the brink, some with fewer than 5,000 individuals left in the wild. The arrival of just a handful of Titanoboas could tip them into extinction, and once that starts, there's no way back. Conflict with alligators, jaguars, and humans, but prey animals wouldn't be the only ones in trouble. Other apex predators like jaguars, alligators, and even humans would be forced into direct conflict. Let's start with alligators and crocodilians. They've been ruling wetlands for millions of years, but now, they'd be outmatched. Titanoboa was larger, faster in water, and able to constrict prey with enough force to crush bone. An adult Titanoboa could overpower a full-grown crocodile, just like it did 60 million years ago. Jaguars, known for their strength and stealth, might initially avoid conflict, but as prey vanishes and territory shrinks, clashes become inevitable. And in that fight, the jaguar, a cat that rarely exceeds 250 pounds, would be outgunned in every way. Now comes the hard part, humans. We like to believe we're at the top, but history tells a different story. In India and Africa, leopards and crocodiles still kill people every year. In Florida, even alligators occasionally make headlines. Now imagine a predator 5 times bigger, able to strike from beneath murky water or from a forest shadow. In rural villages, subsistence communities, and farming regions, Titanoboa wouldn't just be a curiosity, it would be a public safety crisis. Would we respond with guns, traps, drones, or would fear take hold faster than policy? What happens if it invades an island ecosystem? Some of the most fragile ecosystems on Earth exist on islands. Places like the Galapagos, Madagascar, the Philippines, Indonesia. These ecosystems evolved in isolation. Many of their animals, like lemurs, flightless birds, and giant tortoises, have no natural defense against large predators, and in many cases there's no predator at all. Now picture a Titanoboa, pregnant perhaps, washing ashore during a storm or arriving hidden in cargo. It slithers into the jungle, nests, reproduces. The island may never recover. Islands have always been hotspots for extinction. According to the Global Invasive Species Program, over 80% of recorded extinctions have occurred on islands due to invasive species. Rats, snakes, cats, even ants. Titanoboa would be worse than all of them combined. Within a decade, it could erase dozens of species, not just animals, but plant life too. Why? Because when herbivores vanish, seed dispersal breaks down, forest growth slows, and invasive plants take over. One snake, one island, total collapse. Would we declare it an environmental catastrophe? Let's say multiple Titanoboas are confirmed across 3 continents, South America, Asia, Africa. The media would explode, scientists would panic, governments would hold emergency summits, the UN's Convention on Biological Diversity would likely declare it a global ecological emergency, and environmental agencies like the US Fish and Wildlife Service, Brazil's IBAMA, India's Ministry of Environment, would be forced to launch one of the largest containment and eradication efforts in human history. Satellite monitoring, drone patrols, heat-sensing cameras, fire breaks, river nets. We'd throw everything at the problem. But the question isn't what we'd do, it's whether we could stop it. Because by the time we fully recognize the threat, it might already be too late. Titanoboa doesn't care about borders, it doesn't respect laws, and it certainly doesn't stop growing. Once it takes root in an ecosystem, it reshapes the rules. Twist. A few Titanoboas could collapse entire ecosystems. Here's the haunting truth. You don't need an army of Titanoboas to change the world. Just a few. Just 5 or 6, released in the right rainforest or the wrong island, could trigger a chain reaction of local extinctions, food chain implosions, and predator collapse. And by the time we notice, by the time the forests go quiet, and the rivers stop trembling with the splash of native animals, it might already be a Titanoboa world. But what if it doesn't stop there? What if Titanoboa does more than invade? What if it adapts, mutates, or evolves again? In Chapter 6 we follow the ultimate biological nightmare, the rise of the super predator. Could Titanoboa evolve into something worse? Bigger, smarter, meaner, and no longer alone? Chapter 6, Human Encounters. Would we be its prey? Could it eat a human whole? This is the question everyone eventually asks. Could Titanoboa swallow a human? The answer is terrifyingly simple. Yes. Let's take a look at what we already know from modern constrictors. Pythons and anacondas, the Titanoboa's closest living relatives, have been recorded eating animals larger than themselves, including deer, crocodiles, and even adult humans. In fact, in Indonesia there have been confirmed cases of reticulated pythons swallowing fully grown men documented by local authorities and researchers, complete with full-body X-rays of the victims still inside. Now scale that up. Titanoboa was nearly twice the length and 10 times the mass of the largest modern python. That means swallowing a 6-foot, 180-pound human wouldn't even be a challenge. It would be like you eating a hot dog. From a biological standpoint, Titanoboa had the jaw flexibility, muscular force, and digestive system to completely consume and break down a human body, bones, clothes, gear, and all. And worse, you wouldn't see it coming. Like modern boas, it wouldn't chase, it would ambush, silent, still, coiled in the shadows until, snap, you're gone before you can scream. How would we fight back? Let's say Titanoboa starts showing up near rural communities, slithering through rivers, coiled in swamps, lurking near farms. Would we fight or flee? At first, local efforts would look like they always have, shotguns, machetes, traps, but against a 500-pound predator? That's like trying to stop a truck with a pocket knife. Most modern firearms wouldn't even penetrate its thick armored skin. The reality is we'd probably respond the same way ancient humans did to saber-toothed cats or cave bears. We'd move away, leave the area, evacuate the forest, abandon the river. Eventually military forces would get involved, thermal drones, high-caliber rifles, motion-triggered turrets. But there's a catch. Titanoboa doesn't need to win, it just needs to survive long enough to reproduce, and if it reproduces, if it disappears into the jungle to nest, we've already lost. Fighting back isn't about guns, it's about control, and Titanoboa would break our sense of control like it breaks ribs with quiet, crushing force. Would there be mythology, folklore, or religion around it? Throughout human history, massive predators have always become more than animals. They become gods, monsters, legends. The lion-headed gods of Egypt, the thunderbirds of North America, the Naga serpents of Hindu and Buddhist tradition, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerican cultures. Why? Because when a creature becomes so powerful, so dangerous, so impossible to ignore, we don't just fear it, we worship it, or try to. Now imagine rural communities living in fear of Titanoboa, children vanish near rivers, livestock disappear, entire villages go silent. In time, myths would form. The river father must be fed. If you see the ground ripple, lie still. Do not speak its name during storms. Religion might form not out of reverence, but out of survival. Rituals, offerings, even festivals. Not to celebrate Titanoboa, but to keep it away, and that's how legends begin, not with awe, but with terror. Now here's a dark thought. What if Titanoboa wasn't just wild? What if someone tried to control it? In history, humans have used animals in war. Elephants, war horses, even dolphins trained to detect mines. The military fascination with weaponized biology isn't new. In the wrong hands, Titanoboa could be A terror weapon, unleashed in enemy forests or coastlines. A symbol of power, used by warlords to intimidate or control. A black market goldmine, with collectors paying millions for its shed skin, eggs, or even a live juvenile. And in some remote regions, it might even become an object of ritual worship. Secret temples, blood sacrifices, cults built around the belief that Titanoboa is not just an animal, but a force of nature, a god that walks without legs. Would cities be built to avoid its path? Here's a scenario. You live in a growing city by the water. A Titanoboa has been spotted nearby, several in fact. What do? The answer isn't to expand, the answer is to redraw the map. Urban planning would change entirely. No-go zones would be declared, certain rivers would be off-limits, suburbs might be evacuated, infrastructure rerouted, and bridges reinforced to handle sudden appearances. Cities like Manaus, Jakarta, or New Orleans, places built close to jungles or wetlands, would face serious risk. You'd start to see new signs. Warning: Titanoboa habitat, enter at your own risk. Evacuation drill every 6 months. Snake-proof flood barriers under construction. In the age of Titanoboa, the wild wouldn't yield to civilization. Civilization would retreat. Twist: where Titanoboa appears, civilization retreats. This is the moment when we must admit something uncomfortable. If Titanoboa were real, truly back in our world, our cities wouldn't grow bolder. Our species wouldn't rise stronger. We would pull back. Rural communities would vanish. Economic development in biodiverse regions would stop. Travel and tourism would freeze. Even military zones might be abandoned if Titanoboa claimed them. Because for all our walls, weapons, and wonder, we are still afraid of the dark, and Titanoboa is what lives inside it. But what if we turned that fear into something worse? What if we tried to profit from it? In Chapter 7, we'll dive into the chilling possibilities of human greed, ambition, and experimentation. The forbidden experiments. Could Titanoboa be bred, modified, or mass-produced? What happens when science crosses the final line? Chapter 7, Psychology of Fear: How Titanoboa Would Change Culture. Would we still make horror movies about sharks? Let's face it, sharks have ruled fear in media for decades. From Jaws to The Meg, the fear of something unseen lurking below the surface has captured human imagination like few other ideas. It's primal. It's timeless. But if Titanoboa slithered back into our world, the fear of sharks would become almost quaint. Why? Because Titanoboa wouldn't just attack in water, it could strike anywhere, a jungle path, a river dock, even near urban edges. And while sharks are terrifying, they're also limited to oceans. You can avoid them. Titanoboa? You couldn't. Hollywood would pivot overnight. Forget shark movies. We'd get Titanoboa, the jungle god, subway serpent, Coil, the last river town. This creature would dominate horror the way it once dominated prehistoric ecosystems. And unlike aliens, zombies, or haunted dolls, this thing is real. We'd make Titanoboa the new icon of fear, because nothing terrifies like the possible. How news and social media would react. Now imagine the media in a world where Titanoboa is real. Breaking news reports, live video feeds, helicopter footage of a 50-foot snake slithering across farmland. Hashtags trending globally, #Titanoboa sighted, #stay out of the swamp, #snake god. YouTube would explode with amateur drone footage. TikTok would have viral clips of close calls and snake myths. Twitter, or X, would descend into fear, satire, and conspiracy theories. The government is breeding them. This is biblical. The end times are near. Titanoboa is fake. Wake up, sheeple. Meanwhile, 24/7 cable news would churn non-stop coverage debates about Titanoboa's rights as a living species. Arguments over whether we should kill them or preserve them. Reports of attacks, hoaxes, and sightings, some real, some exaggerated. In this digital panic, fear would go viral faster than the snake itself, and when fear becomes shareable, it becomes profitable. In most cultures, reptiles already hold heavy symbolic weight. Snakes can mean evil, rebirth, fertility, or wisdom, depending on where you look, but Titanoboa would rewrite that symbolism entirely. Imagine what happens to fashion snake patterns become controversial, rejected by some, revered by others. When it comes to religion, some communities see Titanoboa as a curse, others a divine force sent to judge humanity. In the world of art, new murals, graffiti, and sculptures begin appearing. Picture a coiled serpent devouring a city or a snake rising from the ocean like a god. In places where Titanoboa is most feared, its image might be banned. In other places, it could become a cultural guardian, believed to protect rivers or forests. The reptile, long a symbol of hidden danger, would now stand for undeniable dominance. Would it become a godlike creature in some regions? Yes, and faster than we'd like to admit. When humans confront something immense, mysterious, and lethal, we often respond with mythology. That's not just ancient history, it's psychological defense. In parts of South America, Southeast Asia, or Central Africa, places where local belief systems already include powerful nature spirits, Titanoboa might not be feared as an animal, it might be worshipped. Or feared as sacred punishment. Imagine shrines in jungle villages with offerings of meat or idols placed near rivers, ritual chants, superstitions passed down. If the river goes still, hide. Some would pray to keep it away, others would pray for its favor, and just like that, the line between biology and divinity would blur. What does Titanoboa reveal about human fear? At the root of it all, Titanoboa reveals something deep about us. Fear is not just about danger, it's about the loss of control. We don't fear lions in zoos, we fear lions in our streets. We don't fear diseases we can treat. We fear the ones we can't detect or stop. Titanoboa isn't scary just because it's big, it's scary because we don't have a solution for it. Its return would remind us that nature still holds cards we can't see, let alone play. That beneath our cities and smartphones and machines, we are still vulnerable animals, walking a world that can erase us without warning. Titanoboa would not just rewire food chains, it would reignite humanity's most ancient fear: being hunted. Twist. Titanoboa would not just change biology, it would change humanity's sense of safety forever. This is the truth no one wants to admit. If Titanoboa returned, we'd never look at the world the same way again. It would mark the end of a psychological age. We no longer walk at the top of the food chain. We share it, with something stronger, older, and perfectly evolved, to remind us that comfort is fragile, that safety is an illusion, and that nature never forgets its monsters. But what if that illusion cracks completely? What if Titanoboa changes not just fear, but law, policy, power, and geopolitics? In Chapter 8, we'll uncover what happens when governments, corporations, and global institutions start asking, who owns Titanoboa? A single snake could start a war. Chapter 8, could Titanoboa be engineered back to life? Real science. Soft tissue versus fossil DNA. What's possible? For decades, scientists believed that DNA breaks down completely after millions of years, making it impossible to bring creatures like Titanoboa back to life. But recent discoveries have changed that assumption. In 2020, researchers found traces of soft tissue inside dinosaur fossils, surprisingly preserved collagen and proteins. This means fossilized remains may hold tiny DNA fragments, enough to try piecing together genomes, especially with new technology. However, there's a catch. DNA degrades over time, especially in tropical environments like Titanoboa's ancient habitat. So while full DNA sequences from Titanoboa's fossils are extremely rare or incomplete, advanced genetics may still reconstruct parts or close relatives. Could we recreate it through selective breeding? Another path scientists consider is selective breeding. Some researchers study modern giant snakes, like anacondas and reticulated pythons, to identify genes linked to size and strength. The idea selectively breed these snakes over generations to create something approaching Titanoboa's size. It's slow and uncertain, but far less controversial than cloning. And it's already happening in labs focused on breeding reptiles for size and adaptability. The bigger question is, would this engineered Titanoboa behave the same? Could it survive in the wild? Or just exist in captivity? What are the ethical concerns? De-extinction isn't just science, it's a moral minefield. Scientists and ethicists debate: is it right to bring back a species that vanished for a reason? What if Titanoboa escaped captivity and disrupted ecosystems? Would resources spent on resurrection be better used conserving endangered species alive today? Environmentalists warn that de-extinction could distract from pressing conservation issues. Others fear the unpredictable consequences of introducing a prehistoric apex predator to a modern world full of humans. Even more unsettling, could Titanoboa be weaponized? If the wrong hands get involved, what starts as scientific curiosity might turn into ecological disaster. How close are we to de-extinction? In recent years, de-extinction has shifted from science fiction to real science. The woolly mammoth resurrection project at Harvard is pioneering ways to insert mammoth genes into Asian elephants, aiming to create a cold-resistant hybrid. Meanwhile, scientists are sequencing the dodo bird's DNA from museum specimens, trying to revive traits in closely related species. These projects show the technology is advancing fast, and it's not just about dinosaurs or extinct mammals anymore. The tools used, like CRISPR gene editing, allow precise changes to genomes, making the idea of bringing back Titanoboa less far-fetched than ever. Would governments ban or promote it? Governments are already debating how to regulate genetic resurrection. Some countries push for strict bans on cloning or releasing extinct species, citing ecological and ethical risks. Others see it as a scientific breakthrough with economic potential, in biotech, medicine, even tourism. Titanoboa could become a flashpoint issue. Would it be protected as a scientific marvel, feared as a biohazard, or weaponized for military use? International treaties like the Convention on Biological Diversity are struggling to keep up with rapid advances, leaving much uncertain. Twist: we are closer than you think. The first Titanoboa embryo could be grown in a lab, within your lifetime. It sounds like science fiction, but given the speed of genetic technology, it's entirely possible. The moment may come when a lab announces, "We have successfully created a viable Titanoboa embryo." What then? Would you want to see this prehistoric giant slither back into the world, or stay behind glass forever? Would humanity celebrate a scientific miracle, or curse an ecological nightmare? The future is already taking shape, and Titanoboa's story is far from over. If Titanoboa does return, who controls it? Who decides whether it's a miracle or a monster? In Chapter 9, we'll explore the power struggles, politics, and consequences when a creature of this scale walks the earth again. Chapter 9, the final chapter, A World Ruled by Snakes. What if Titanoboa becomes Earth's dominant predator again? Imagine a world where Titanoboa slithers not just in forgotten swamps, but dominates vast landscapes once more. Its sheer size and power could put every predator we know, jaguars, crocodiles, even humans, on the defensive. Forests would echo with the silence of smaller prey gone extinct, replaced by an apex predator that never left? Would Titanoboa reshape food chains? Could it hunt anything that moves? And what would that mean for other large animals? Would humanity be forced to rethink its place at the top of the food chain? If Titanoboa ruled the surface, would humans retreat to underground cities, like something out of a science fiction nightmare? History shows how people adapt to threats. Maybe massive bunkers, tunnels, or high-tech sanctuaries could become our new homes. Would the surface become a wild zone patrolled by giant snakes too dangerous to confront? Or would some humans try to coexist, learning to live alongside a creature that could easily crush them? A Titanoboa-dominated Earth might push humanity into a biotech arms race. Scientists and militaries would scramble to develop defenses, genetic weapons, enhanced predators, or even bioengineered super soldiers. Could humans create robotic hunters or snake-hunting drones? Or might Titanoboa itself evolve faster in response, becoming smarter and deadlier? The clash between ancient biology and cutting-edge tech could define the future of life on Earth. What would a Titanoboa-dominated Earth look like in 10,000 years? Fast forward 10,000 years. Would Titanoboa have evolved into different subspecies? Would it dominate continents or shrink due to ecological pressures? Would humans have vanished or evolved new ways to survive alongside giant snakes? Would the Earth's ecosystem stabilize around this new reality or collapse entirely? Evolution never stops, and the presence of such a massive predator could rewrite the rulebook for survival. History tells us apex predators shape ecosystems, but too much power can mean collapse. Could Titanoboa's resurgence push other species to extinction, triggering a mass die-off? Could fragile rainforests, island ecosystems, or freshwater habitats be wiped out? Would humans be collateral damage in a natural purge, or the architects of it? The balance of life is delicate, and Titanoboa might just be the tipping point. Twist ending. Maybe nature buried Titanoboa for a reason. Maybe we were never meant to coexist. For millions of years, Titanoboa slithered into extinction. Maybe Earth's balance required it. Maybe some giants are too big, too powerful, too dangerous to share a world with. Could Titanoboa's disappearance have been a mercy, both for humanity and nature itself? Or was it simply the luck of survival? As we look to the future, one question remains. Are we ready to face the monster we once buried, or was it better left in the past? If Titanoboa returned, would it be the end of humanity as we know it, or the beginning of a new evolutionary chapter? The answer lies not just in science, but in our choices. What would you do if Titanoboa came back? What if we bring it back anyway? With the incredible tools and technology we have today, bringing Titanoboa back from extinction isn't just a fantasy anymore. It's becoming a real possibility. But here's the question that matters most. Not just can we bring it back, but should we? We're drawn to lost legends, to the mysteries buried in time. The idea of resurrecting a giant snake from prehistory is thrilling, almost irresistible. Yet maybe Titanoboa stands as a warning, a symbol of nature's limits and balances. Some monsters, no matter how fascinating, might be best left resting beneath the earth where time buried them. Because reviving them isn't just about science or curiosity, it's about facing consequences we can't fully predict. So, if Titanoboa ever comes back, the real question is, are we ready to live in a world ruled by giants? Or is some part of the past meant to stay exactly where it belongs? Thank you for joining this incredible journey into the world of Titanoboa. A creature so massive and mysterious it still sparks our imagination millions of years later. We've explored what life might be like if this giant snake never disappeared, how it could change everything from ecosystems to human society, and even the ethical dilemmas of bringing it back. But before you go, here's something to think about. What if Titanoboa is already here, hidden, evolving in the darkest corners of our planet? Could there be descendants unknown to science, silently watching us? Or maybe the real monster isn't a snake at all, but the choices we make when we try to play God with nature. So what do you think? Would you want Titanoboa back? And if it did return, how would you survive in a world ruled by a 50-foot snake? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep the conversation alive. Because sometimes the biggest questions aren't about the past, but what's still waiting in the shadows.